Hey everybody, it's Side of the Wind Sage, and welcome to something rather different from the norm for videos I usually do. This is kind of what I call a bit of a discussion slash tier list video. Rather kind of put this video into context, while I was doing my Kiss for the Petals Maidens of Michael playthrough, I always kind of talked about the idea of a video of me kind of discussing the characters and couples of the story. Now, I did do a lot of discussing of characters and couples in the story while reading it, but now I kind of wanted to do it now that the dust has kind of settled on everything and I can kind of, lay some things definitively, down. Well, not definitively. My opinion is prone to change on this stuff quite a bit, but, anyway. This is off-scripted also, if you haven't noticed, but what I decided to do is I want to actually follow through and make that video that kind of discusses all these characters, what I like, what I don't like, and just kind of that general discussion video. This is going to be more about the characters and less about the couples, though, as I plan to make a separate video about that specifically. Now, the question on everyone's mind probably is, why the tier list format? And is this just straight up a tier list? Well, yes and no. As some people may have noticed, at least at the time of this being recorded, the tier list is kind of a growing little interest in YouTube videos. And honestly, I've seen quite a few tier list videos myself. And what I like about these tier list videos is that they kind of, depending on whether it's more casual or more kind of serious, it can spark a lot of discussion. And not only can it spark a lot of discussion, it can create a lot of discussion, as there's a lot of explanation, detailing, and all that stuff that needs to go on. And I think for the sake of this sort of video of discussing these characters, the idea of kind of putting it in a tier list format to help organize my thoughts and stuff like that is really going to help me. I'm using the fairly traditional tier maker setup, and actually, in fact, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Editing will probably makes this a little easier, but yeah, let's right back here. But yeah, I decided that this will probably be the easiest way to organize my thoughts so I don't really slip off into tangents too much, and it will kind of give me a way to organize these characters. Now, that being said, I want this video to be mostly about the discussion rather than the video to be mostly about discussion rather than anything else. So where the characters end up on the tier list, I feel should be kind of second to my opinion and discussion about the characters anyway. And again, this is prone to change, especially as I continue on with the series and read more stories from them. This is just more after my opinions of Maidens of Michael's, but I am going to be using all the stories. Also, if you're curious, yes, I did make this tier list format myself. As you probably expect, there's not a lot of Kiss for the Petals tier lists formats that I could have used, so I made this one myself. It has all the characters up to Maidens of Michael's, which are all the characters I'm fairly familiar with up to this point. And of course, if I do a video like this in the future, with more stories and perhaps more things under my belt, I'll probably make a bigger version of this, but I thought this right now would be doing it. I set everyone up with from what I understand is appearance order, and we're going to be kind of going down that line, starting with Anami, ending in Reina. So, with all that kind of preamble out of the way, I think it's time to just really start this. Also, like I said, this video is very much unscripted. And not only that, I didn't really put any pre-advanced thought on where I was going to put these characters. I kind of want my opinions to while kind of well organized, also just be kind of authentic. I don't want to overthink something or underthink something, so if a character starts in a certain position on the list, be certain that's probably going to change. And one more thing, the way it's going is S, A, B, C, D. I really like using 5 for kind of lists like this, as B is going to kind of be the average point. I feel it's very important to have an odd number for something like this, so you have an average point. A and C are above average and below average respectively. S is greatly above average, and D is greatly below average. And again, since I haven't really thought this through, there might be some tiers that just aren't used, but I'm probably going to try and use every tier at least once, but I'm not going to force it to be a certain way. So yeah, with everything said, let's kind of dive right into it. With Yuna, Now, Yuna, when it comes to a character, I feel is a very... Honestly, since my reference for these characters, for Yuna and Nanami, and I said Yuna, didn't I? Nanami. For Nanami, then Yuna, it's just gonna be... I go from their first story, which is the first story in the series, which is my least favorite Kiss for the Petals stories. Which is my least favorite Kiss for the Petals story overall, and one of the only ones that I sincerely kind of don't like. To Maidens of Michael, Yuna and Nanami, which is honestly a really good couple, and I really liked it. So I have a really kind of like, I guess, a little bit of a polarized opinion of these characters. But if I was to say for right now, I think I'm gonna put Yuna in Nanami. I think I'm gonna put Nanami in B tier for right now, because I really do like Nanami. She's a very interesting character. Maidens of Michael especially fleshes out her character. She's part of the freshman club and appears in quite a few of the stories. Her friendship with Risa and Sarah is really well done, and I really do like it. So I feel that, you know, B tier, the kind of average tier, is good because her first appearance kind of brings her down a bit. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm going to stand on that right now. Nanami honestly can probably shoot up to A tier, probably, but I want to give that a bit more consideration. Maybe do that a little bit more down the road. But right now, Nanami in B tier kind of works for me. She's a very average character. She's not particularly outstanding. She's kind of like a very normal and average girl. I mean, she's above average in some ways. Like, she's not like, she doesn't fit into the typical norm, I guess. Like, she has her weird moments, but she's overall a fairly, you know, sane and put together character. She's kind of but she can't kind of go out there. Like, I'd want to say, like, among her little friend circle of the freshman club, like, she's like the straight man of the group, but not really. As, like, depending on the context, she has kind of gone along with Sarah's whims a little bit. Sometimes Sarah tricks her into it. Sometimes because she's, like authentically kind of, like, going along with it. Like, I believe when Risa talks about how she did it for the first time with Mia, like, she had her first time, like, Nanami's just up there with Sarah, like, yeah, way to go, I knew you could do it. Like, yeah, it makes her a very enjoyable character. Her little arc in Maidens of Michael's also was a really weird thing, because again, I felt like some of that arc should have been used on Yuna, but it wasn't. So, like, I like her kind of first and the primary arc that she goes through. And then that secondary thing, again, really should have gone to Yuna, but I'll talk about that in a bit. I like the character overall, and I feel she's a very interesting character. But for right now, I think I'm going to put her in average, though that may change depending on who else ends up there. That being said, Yuna, oh boy, okay, C rank, honestly could go down to D rank, it really depends. Honestly, C might just be the lowest anyone goes down in rank, but we'll see. Again, she's a really good she has some potential for D, trust me. But, the thing about Yuna is, honestly, Yuna is really brought down by the first story. If I do a couples video, I'm gonna talk about it later, but the couple, honestly, itself feels rushed, and I feel should have had a lot more time to grow and develop before they actually became a couple. But Yuna is part of the reason a lot of this just does not work out like it should. It kind of gets, the couple gets really rushed overall in the first story, honestly, Yuna's personality in the first story is honestly sometimes it feels like it's just a bit insufferable. I get what they're going for. She's the first kind of dirty girl of the series, and she sets a trend going forward for everyone else. But unlike every other girl who's in the dirty girl perverted nature sort of thing, Yuna overplays it in the first story. She really does, and it's honestly, Yuna is just Yuna is honestly the part of the first Kiss for the Petals that I kind of like, that kind of like drags and I kind of dread, and like she's the second half of that. Like she's the major half of that. Well, you know, you can say Nanami is the major half since she's the main character, but like, Yuna is like a half of this story, and I don't really like her in the first one. And so yeah, she's really one note when being perverted. She doesn't have many other character traits. They talk about all these things that kind of make her an idol, like her charismatic personality, her like good sense of leadership. You know, I think they even say in the first story that she wants to be like a doctor, and she's like kind of training for that. But you don't really get a sense of that. What you get a sense of is just her extremely perverted nature, and in many times actually her abuse of power, where she uses the authority she has and she uses it. For example, I think there's one time where Yuna wants to have a one-on-one conversation with Nanami. I think it was about a jealousy sort of thing. I don't fully remember. And like, you know, they eventually end up having sex later on in the freaking classroom, and it's because Yuna like arranged it so that no one would show up. Like, I forgot how she did it, but she did it somehow, and it's like, god damn it, Yuna. All that being said, though, and a lot of that really does sound like D-tier material, but what makes up for it is kind of Maidens of Michael, and this might be a trend you might see going forward, how Maidens of Michael really kind of fix things, where Maidens of Michael, like, really fixed a lot of Yuna's things. We got to see a lot more of her, we got to see a lot more aspects of her. We definitely got to see that leadership, we got to see that charisma. It was we kind of got to see more of parts of the girl that Nanami fell in love with. It's very clear that the girl Nanami fell in love with was that kind of part of her, because she didn't even know about the dirty girl part until like until part way into the story. And you know, the whole kind of hidden deviant thing. Like, Nanami loves that part. Like, Nanami also loves that part of her, but it's not what she fell in love with. And seeing the Yuna that Nanami fell in love with really helps the couple out. We see that kind of strong determination, that charisma, that kind of really good sense of leadership skill. Not only with the committee, not only with the activities committee, but with the, I think she's also in the beautification committee. Is that what it's called? Like the first thing she's in. Like, we see a lot of aspects of that stuff. We see that she works really hard, kind of to the point of overextending herself and overworking herself, which, you know, then, you know, results in her kind of collapsing Nanami, and Nanami has to take over kind of Yuna's position, at least while they're doing like the whole scrapbooking thing. And it's, again, that's why I kind of feel like Yuna could have used that story arc, because Nanami eventually, she gets overwhelmed by the work that Yuna was doing. She has to put all the responsibility on herself. She doesn't quite pass out from it, like her collapse due to overexhaustion, but she is kind of later motivated by her friends to just kind of take it easy and take a step back. And I feel that's really what they should have done with Yuna. That being said, Yuna is greatly improved, like I always talked about, in Maidens of Michael's. Her kind of dirty girl nature is kind of less emphasized, and it's more used for comedy. And it does lead to some very interesting moments. Like when Yuna kind of shows her true colors to Risa a little bit. Risa's really thrown off. Like they're talking about romance or something like that. And like Risa's really thrown off. And I think she just like runs out of the room because she just doesn't quite know how to handle it. And like I think Risa's like, I remember Risa's like really thrown off by it. Like, is that like what she's truly like? But yeah, it's downplayed. It's definitely played more for comedy. There's also like the dirt eagle comment. Like that was a pretty funny little localization joke, and I see it's kind of like I don't mind the perverted character. They can be pretty comedic. The pervertedness can be used kind of for comedy, and kind of seeing, and I'll admit, kind of seeing the teasing they do to the other characters, and just kind of seeing their reactions can lead to some very funny things as well. With all aspects that she failed on in her first story, but really did succeed in Maidens of Michael. So it kind of balances out. I feel like she'd be like a B or maybe even an A tier character if it wasn't for the first story that really drags her down. I'm cautiously hopeful for their second story. As, you know, for all the things I give you, for all the shit I give Yuna about, Nanami is only a slightly better character in their first story, but it's also the first story, and the first story seemed more to do sex and erotica over the story, as opposed to now the kind of inverse or kind of balance act they do now. So I'm looking forward to the second story, but I'm cautiously optimistic, as Yuna could be just as bad in that one. But I am holding my breath. And Maidens of Michael does make her overall a really good character. And a character I can appreciate and actually like quite a bit, but it kind of comes with she's a really good character now, but she was a really bad character then. So I guess you can say I can put her in B tier, but I think right now it's the bad doesn't outweigh the good, but it drags the good down so much. It has to, like, if Nanami's here and I really like Nanami, Yuna has to be below because I didn't like Yuna for a while. Well, only 16 minutes in, we have 2 characters down. This is going to be like kind of like probably an average length video, honestly. It really depends when I start getting into discussion for the other characters. But anyway, speaking of other characters, Sarah. Ooh boy, I'm kind of starting with my negatives, aren't I? Ooh, yeah, C tier. Unlike Yuna, it's not really like she doesn't really make a contender for D tier, but Sarah can just be a very frustrating character sometimes. Don't get me wrong, I like how she is in Maidens of Michael and in kind of the second story, but oh god, there's so many slip-ups. Where do I begin? So I guess starting about the wait, did I say Sarah about this whole time? Kaede, god damn it. Okay, Kaede is okay. In the first story, she's not a good character. I get what they're going for. She's the very shy character, the very nervous character, very doesn't like being center of attention, but it's to such an extreme degree in the first story, where she's actively hiding, kind of like trying to be like, oh, I hope to God no one notices me. Like she's like, it's not like where it would be just kind of like not wanting to be a center of attention. She doesn't seem to want to exist sometimes. And I get what all that's for. It's the contrast it's the contrast to her lover Sarah, who is very much center of attention and is kind of do the whole thing. And I love the growth at the end of the first story, how she grows into that character. The character Sarah fell in love with. You're going to kind of see a trend of this, of characters falling in love with characters falling in love with different characters for a different reason. Because apparently Kaede was a bit more outgoing, or a bit more like a prince, as Sarah describes it. And I can see part of that, kind of like almost a knight in shining armor sort of thing to Sarah, who I can only guess was probably a bit meeker in her childhood. But honestly, Kaede spends too much of the story like that in the first story. And it's kind of a little bit of a disappointing thing of like, something to note about Kaede is that the way she kind of presents herself and her design is actually very on purpose. The kind of traditional ponytail sort of thing is actually just supposed to be a very average look. And she wears glasses because she actually doesn't even wear glasses because she needs them. From what I understand, she's like, I think she has she needs them for reading, or she's like slightly like nearsighted or something like that. Like she kind of it stemmed from somewhere. Like she didn't just get empty frames for no reason, but she really doesn't need the glasses. She can see just fine for the most part, to the point where she doesn't need the glasses. But she does both those things so she doesn't stand out. That kind of culminates in the end when Sarah kind of says like, we're going to give you a bit of a makeover, kind of redesign you. And so Sarah lets down her hair. So Sarah has Kaede let down her hair and removes her glasses. And you know what? It kind of goes with the thing. She attracts a lot of attention from that, and she actually is very beautiful like that. And she's kind of walking around. She gets everyone's attention, and then it ends with Sarah kind of being very anxious. It ends with Sarah being very anxious, kind of jealous, and she's like, please don't do that again. And, you know, that's just kind of how it ends. Like, that kind of show of confidence, and they sadly don't do anything with it anymore, because she lets her hair down and takes off her glasses in the second book sometimes. I think she, like, does it once for a bath scene and then does it for, like, the end. She rarely does it. But, and that's mostly because Sarah doesn't like her doing it. Like, it was Sarah's idea, and, like, she doesn't like her doing that. And she didn't like it. She didn't like all the attention that Kaede was getting. Not because Sarah is, like, an attention hog or anything, but she didn't want people looking at Kaede the same way she does, I think was her thing. But, yeah, the problem with Kaede is she spends a lot of time kind of as the nervous, like, the very extreme nervous, shy, and meek girl with not wanting to be a center of attention. She spends a lot of the first story like that, and it's kind of frustrating to see. And even Sarah, and it's recognized how frustrating it is, because I think Sarah, like, pins her down to a bed and freaking, like, screams at her, like, hey, get your shit together, or something like that. She's not as violent, she's not as, you know, crass as that. And it's more out of, like, love and affection rather than just being angry. But, and it's only at that moment that where Kaede realizes she needs to kind of get herself together, and she does. And she becomes a very interesting character because of it. She's a fairly average character in their second book. I believe it's My Beloved Photograph. And Maidens of Michael really does bring that out. She's a very more courageous person. She doesn't like being the center of attention, but you know what? That's fine. Not a lot of people like being the center of attention, getting stares at. Eris is very similar, and you can see that with you kind of can get that with, like, the Santa Claus outfit thing. But then we get to Maidens of Michael. She goes through a really strong character arc, which is kind of a continuation of My Beloved Photograph's character arc for her. But she goes through a really amazing character arc. But it doesn't really amount to much of anything. Because, you know, she goes through a character arc, wanting to support Sarah's career, no longer letting any jealousy get to her. Like, there's that one moment where Sarah says she wants to quit, and Kaede is, like, authentically happy about that. It's like, I'll get to have her all to myself. But then she's like, I know that's a selfish way of thinking. And then she, you know, she kind of maturely and almost, like, parentally scolds Sarah. Like, a lot of people, like, worked hard to get you as far as you are now. You can't just stop halfway for a selfish reason. And, you know, it's partly projecting her feelings and kind of, like, almost scolding herself in a way as well, but it's also to help keep Sarah in check. And I like that manager kind of role for her. And then she becomes Sarah's modeling partner. But no, even before that, we have this small little anxiety thing where she goes from 100% supporting Sarah. Sarah says she's gonna get a modeling partner. Kaede was never told about this and doesn't know who it is, so she's kind of worried about that. It's like I count that as unnecessary, but kind of harmless. It feels more like it's there to pad out the time than actually something they were trying to go for. But it's fine. But then it turns out the modeling partner is Sarah, modeling partner is Kaede, which very, very predictable. But, you know, then it kind of goes where, like, it forces her into kind of being the center of attention. It puts her into a role she doesn't want. As you see, she struggles with it. She struggles with it to the point of, like, really messing up. And, you know, she struggles to the point of really messing up, and she doesn't want to do it. But she kind of, like, she's eventually told that, you know, mistakes happen, because she was really beating herself up over the mistake. That mistakes happen, you know, you just kind of gotta roll with them, you'll get better. Which is a really motivating message, except it feels like Sarah doesn't want to do this. And it kind of, like, it even kind of confirms that, like, at the end, like, she pretty much doesn't want to do it, but she will do anything for Sarah. Which is why she's still her modeling partner at the end. And honestly, I feel like that's not kind of the thing. If she tried it, really wasn't up for it, and kind of told, like, Sarah, like, I want to continue helping you and supporting your career just from the shadows where I'm comfortable, and there was that kind of understanding, I feel like that would have been a better ending to it. So that's why I feel like it's for those reasons that why the secondary arc for Kaede wasn't necessary. And kind of the way it ends with her being Sarah's modeling partner kind of does frustrate me. So yeah, I think that's all I can really say about Kaede. She's an alright character, just dragged down by a few things. That's not of her own fault, it's just kind of the situation the story puts her through, you know? Anyway, from one character on to another, Sarah. You know, I'll put her in C tier for now, but don't worry, we'll get to A and S tiers, don't worry. So Sarah, why is she in C tier? Well, and this one again, I might even move her up to B tier. It's honestly a debate. My thing about it with Sarah is that Sarah is a very kind of different character. Sarah's very kind of Sarah's a very outgoing, you know, kind of fun, joyful character. Sometimes she sometimes she can go to a bit of an extreme that, it's kind of her perverted nature that kind of rubs off on Kaede a little bit. Something I didn't mention is that Kaede grows a bit bolder after her development. Like, she doesn't like being the center of attention, but she kind of like can like do some bold things, and I believe like she's one of the first pervert characters to act like non-pervert characters to actually kind of instigate sex sometimes, like instigate sex like more than once. Because I think every non-perverted character has done it once, has like instigated sex once, but like Kaede has like kind of like instigated it a few times as well. And she grows bolder with Sarah, and I feel that's fine. And you know, it's not like she's completely, totally meek and wanting to be non-existent with other people anymore, so I like that. But anyway, now on to Sarah. Sarah is this very peppy, outgoing character. Sometimes feels a little bit like comic relief sometimes with the other couples, but she can get pretty serious with Kaede. So she mostly keeps a very optimistic, upbeat attitude, just kind of about everything, and it's kind of what makes her work as a character, is that she can kind of keep that upbeat personality. And is, you know, sometimes where people overthink things, she's like, oh, come on, let's just do it, you know? And she's kind of that attitude, and it kind of works for her more than it doesn't. Her impulsive nature kind of has never gotten her in trouble, because she seems pretty smart about it, but yeah. That being said, her deviant nature is certainly not a point of shame for her. Like, were there people like kind of closet pervert, or just like less perverted and more like they're just kind of bold in nature? Like, Sarah just kind of goes all the way with it. Maids of Michael definitely, Maids of Michael's definitely, she has no problem hiding the fact that she is extremely perverted. And I feel like she's one of the most perverted characters, at least openly. Because, ooh, goddamn, like, so many times, and like, just about every single moment she appears in, Risa's story especially, oh, Risa and Nanami, poor girls, oh shit, the stuff they have to put up with sometimes. It's like we called it reckless mode, and it's like, oh, yep, that is certainly a thing. Another thing about it, I think I'm gonna move Sarah up to B tier. Honestly, because I'm starting to think about it more and more, and I really do. I do kind of like her. She has her problems, like you know, she's not my favorite character, obviously, but I think putting her in that average, kind of above average territory, you know, works for her, because her personality doesn't really change much from story to story. She gets a bit more, though she feels like she gets a bit more bolder each time. And when they fall into more serious moments, I like the way they do them. In the first story, you know, we're seeing her kind of like really push Kaede to develop. It's like, you know, we see her really, you know, push Kaede to develop into the better person, or the kind of person that she was before and seems meant to be. It really pushes Kaede's character growth, and it's because she gets serious and has a serious discussion with her. And then she kind of goes right back to being playful, it's fine. The second story, there's this kind of like jealousy arc going on. She's just like really like, she gets like really like jealous and paranoid with other people sometimes, especially when some people, like, I think someone brings up how Kaede, you know, let her hair down and took off her glasses, and Sarah kind of like wigs out about that. Like Sarah kind of wigs out about that, and that kind of is a thing that keeps going throughout the entire like persists throughout the entire second story. Then we kind of see this like moment of vulnerability and like actual like seriousness when I believe she breaks like a photographer's camera by accident, and she's worried she's gonna like lose that modeling gig because of it. And you know, Kaede's there to encourage her and tell her, you know, it's an honest mistake, it happens, and I'm pretty sure everything will be alright. But it's like seeing that kind of moment of vulnerability and weakness is a very interesting thing. Is kind of like a very interesting thing for Sarah, and I kind of like seeing those moments, which all culminates in Maiden of Michaels. Maiden of Michaels, like everything else, like everyone else, and everyone else probably going forward too, is the best incarnation of that character. Especially in her story, Sarah's arc and plot in Maidens of Michaels is one of my favorites in Maidens of Michael, actually. Now separation anxiety was a thing talked about in the second story, but it was mostly seen through Kaede's perspective. But now we see it through a lot of Sarah's perspective. We see a lot of we see the hell that kind of the industry is. Because it's a rough industry out there for modeling, especially I feel in Japan. It's pretty pretty rough. And you know, we see Sarah with all these insecurities. Is she just riding off her mother's coattails? Like that's how it feels like sometimes, that everyone's just kind of comparing her to her mother, who's a successful and famous actress. Like, is she just riding her coattails? And if she is, she doesn't want to do that, or is that why people like her as much as they do? And you know, there's all these comparisons, and then we see kind of the toll. We see the toll that the modeling business really takes on her. Aside from those even small things that we've seen beforehand, like the fact that she doesn't really eat that much. Like she has to work hard to keep her figure. She doesn't work hard to eat. She has to work hard to keep the figure she's got. And so yeah, and I feel seeing all that seriousness does help balance out a lot of the playful nature. And again, the playful nature is, you know, it's playful and it's generally pretty funny. Is with it, but I like the super serious tone it got for a bit. Like, and you see during her and Kaede's anniversary dinner, like she's so freaking depressed. Destroys her. And it was like she got that cake for her and Kaede to share, and she trips and scrapes her knee, but she drops the cake, and that's what she's more worried about. That's such a sad scene. It's like Kaede's part certainly doesn't help make it any, certainly doesn't help, but yeah, honestly, it's a very kind of serious and kind of emotional thing going on, and I really, you know, I really like how they handled Sarah in Maidens of Michaels. She wasn't anything too spectacular in the first two stories, but Maidens of Michael really knocks it out of the park, takes it all the way. And I really do enjoy Sarah in Maidens of Michael. So yeah, she's B. Again, if she wasn't kind of meh in the first two stories, she can easily be an A tier. And hell, she might even make it up there, but I think we've set kind of the precedent for B and C, so yeah. That being said, yeah, we're probably not going to be using D tier. I'm kind of previewing all these characters, and oh, yeah, I don't see anyone falling into D tier. But yeah, actually, I don't know if it's editing or I'm just going to make this its own separate part, but yeah, I think I'm going to be right back, because I've been talking about these characters for quite a bit, and you know, either in editing or something like that. I'm going to take a small break and keep going in a bit.